Hi there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. There are very few cultures in the galaxy that are defined specifically by the things they wear. For a Mandalorian, their suit of armor is very much like a second skin, one that they would feel naked without, and so they wear it around all day, even when they're not even remotely close to the battlefield. Today we're going to be taking a look at the history of Mandalorian armor and talk about how the design has evolved from the beginning. The Mandalorian ethnic group evolved from a species known as the Tuang. These were a nomad clan-based warrior race that originally populated ancient Coruscant. Obsessed with combat, honor, and pleasing the gods, the Tuangs developed the foundation for Mandalorian society. For instance, they would create the canons of honor in order to govern themselves, and that would basically serve as the foundation for future Mandalorian law. The Tuang also began developing armor for combat, which would serve as a basis for the Mandalorians' tradition of wearing plate armor. Tuang helmets were quite unique and custom made to fit the face of the warrior wearing it. Now, body armor also was worn, but unlike the Mandalorians that would follow them, the Tuang would not put any weapons on their armor because they believed that unarmed combat gave an individual the most honor. The Tuang were eventually driven from Coruscant by the more numerous human tribes. They would journey through the stars until they reached the world of Mandalore. By 4000 BB1, the Tuang had turned into the Mandalorian ethno-culture. As a people, they were made up of aliens now from a variety of different species. Their shared culture, armor, and love for warfare is what united them. At the time, one Tuang soldier would rise to the top through his combat abilities. He'd become known as Mandalore the Indomitable and would lead the Mandalorians on their first galactic crusade. The Mandalorian Crusaders could be identified by their armor, which was jagged and very organic looking. Each design was different and based on the warrior's individual taste. It wasn't uncommon for Crusader armor to be adorned with spikes and horns to make the fighter look more like the beasts that ancient Mandalorians would hunt. Most of this protection at the time was designed for melee combat. It's unknown if bes'kar had been discovered and incorporated into armor designs by this point in history. Most likely not. Now, one of the big strengths of Mandalorian culture is their ability to learn and absorb technology and information from other races they either encounter or take over. Mandalore the Indomitable would eventually be defeated in combat by a fallen Jedi. These Force users would pose a huge threat to the Mandalorians. But instead of avoiding the Jedi or the Sith, the Mandalorians saw this as a key opportunity to improve their fighting abilities and start looking at different technologies that could help level the playing field when fighting Force users. Now, before we continue, today's episode was brought to you by Ridge Wallets. Ridge designs sleek metal wallets that have a lifetime warranty. They're about the size of a credit card but can hold up to 12 cards plus cash. This is about how big a Ridge wallet is compared to my head. As you can tell, this is the Tiki version, which is very tropical and also blocks RFID signals. It's the perfect present for the individual who is used to carrying around very bulky and unorganized wallets. Check out the link down below for more information about Ridge wallets, and if you use our code GENTECH, that's all caps, you can get 10% off and free worldwide shipping. Even though the Crusades under Mandalore the Indomitable failed, and ultimately the Sith were responsible for dragging them into an unwinnable conflict, the Mandalorians still viewed the First Crusade in a very favorable light. I mean, for one, the Mandalorians loved killing and going to war, but also the Crusades helped unify the Mandalorian people. It also gave them tons of new planets, resources, and technology. It also improved their fighting ability, so there were a lot of pluses to these massive crusades. A new Mandalore would arise known as Mandalore the Ultimate. He wanted to redefine the Mandalorian identity and rebuild his people as a dominant power in the galaxy. At the time, there was a cult of Mandalorians known as the Neocrusaders. These individuals did a few things very differently from the rest of their society. For one, they wore identical suits of armor. They also had a chain of command and a system of labor division. Mandalorians were fiercely individualistic. This meant on the battlefield it was merit, not rank or position, that determined who would lead men into combat. This is why standardization of Mandalorian culture was seen as a very strange thing. But Mandalore the Ultimate realized that unless they organized their own people, the Mandalorians would never have the numbers or focus to truly dominate the galaxy. Cassius Fett, one of Mandalore the Ultimate's closest advisors, would develop the Neo-Crusader armor for wider Mandalorian society. These armors were color-coded. The blue armor was for lower-ranking individuals, whereas field marshals would wear something closer to golden color. Silver was worn by veterans of the front, and rally masters usually wore red. Not all Mandalorians wore Neo-Crusader armor during this period, though. You had individuals like the famous scientist Demigul, who chose to wear more traditional Crusader armor, which he had upgraded himself. Then there was also the Neo-Crusader Shock Trooper armor. These were given to Neo-Crusaders who had proven themselves in the trials of combat. These were considered heavy suits of armor that had additional protection. They also had a very different helmet from the other Neo-Crusaders. The Neo-Crusaders would eventually meet their defeat at the hands of the fallen Jedi Revan. Revan would defeat Mandalore the Ultimate in one-on-one combats, and he would seize the Mask of Mandalore and hide it, preventing the Mandalorians from crowning another leader. His actions would scatter the Mandalorian people all across the galaxy and prevent them from gathering together for another future crusade. It was during this time that Mandalorian armor became more customized. The Neo-Crusader style of armor had gone out of fashion. Eventually, the Mandalorian Super Commando armor was created. Unlike the previous iterations of Mandalorian armor, Super Commando armor was made up of extremely durable Mandalorian iron or cheaper Duraplast materials. This armor also had a lot less coverage than previous armor and focused only on protecting the essential parts of a warrior. This could be because of the prohibitively expensive cost of bes'kar, or perhaps it was just a weight-saving measure. Mandalorians during this time also started seeing the benefit of bolting on additional weapons to their armor. We began seeing dart shooters, grappling wires, flamethrowers, even rocket launchers. This greatly increased the firepower of your average Mandalorian and made them much more competitive, especially against Force users. Super Commandos were also defined by their use of jetpacks, which they could ride into battle and surprise their enemies with. With these jetpacks, Super Commandos were much more mobile, and they could also control the vertical battlefield with relative ease. Now that Mandalorian society had been fragmented, the Mandalorians didn't need to equip themselves for larger battlefields. Now they needed to be ready for a life as a private contractor, aka mercenary or bounty hunter. Many jobs required Mandalorians to go alone and without backup. So the Super Commando armor was basically a system of redundant weapons and defenses that gave a single Mandalorian as much firepower and options as possible in any situation. So from Jango Fett to Din Djarin, most of the modern Mandalorians that we see wearing armor are most likely wearing Super Commando style armor. So there you have it, guys. That's a brief overlook of the history of Mandalorian armor. Let me know in the comment section below which is your favorite. Are you a Neo-Crusader guy, or do you like walking around looking like you're wearing animal bones? I won't judge. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.